Hey guys, Randall here from Bragg & Rice Precision. Hope you're having a blessed and wonderful day as always. So today we're going to be showing you how to install the new upgrade kit on the bearings and also a new part that's going to help with the shuttle on your X10 press. It's going to help you slide everything in a little easier into the shell plate and have less issues with it locking up. So Frankfurt Arsenal has been listening. They've been watching the groups. I've been helping with that. And they have put together a bearing and bushing kit that will upgrade what you have currently in your X10. And my understanding is that these are going to be in the future presses. So let's get started. Let's keep it as short as possible. There's a lot to go over, but it's a fairly simple process. And let's get you upgraded, guys. Let's get you a nice, smoother press. All right, let's do it. To perform this, you're going to need some basic tools. As you can tell, I've got all my Wheeler tools out and then some others. So in the kit, you're going to receive a new arm. This new arm is an updated one. Has a different type bearing in it. This replaces the one on the side of your press where the handle is. And this is what raises the block for swage and priming. These are the bushings that's going to go in that same block. It's going to make it much smoother and tighter. This is going to replace one of the bushings and bearings that's in your shuttle that pushes your cases forward. Had a few issues with people having that crush and get a flat spot. These are for the indexing arm. I've got a video on how to replace these, but we're going to go over it again in this video. And this is the wedge that works with the shuttle that pushes your cases forward. This is a new design. If you noticed, it's multiple step instead of one basic graduation. This changes the speed, not the timing, but the speed at which it causes the case to approach the shell plate. It slows it down. It's going to improve pushing the cases into your shell plate and help prevent jamming and locking up. It works very well. We're going to start by removing the tool head. You should already know how to do this. I showed you all of this during my setup videos. We're not going to make a long drawn out of it because, again, you should already know the procedure. We'll fast forward through all of this for you. Can't show you what's under the red bag. Ancient Chinese secret. Next, let's remove your priming system. Now let's remove the plunger cover. Let's remove the slide and the plunger. You can leave the plunger on there. And go ahead and remove the spring retainer. Move the top and the bottom slides, or slide pins. When you remove the rest of the assembly, be careful not to bend the spring. At this point, you want to inspect the slides. Make sure they don't have any grooves or damage from the linear bearings being bad. It's usually the top one that has the most pressure on it. Both of mine, as you can see, are fine. If they're not, you can smooth them off with some emery cloth. So on the assembly, we are only going to replace the top bearing. That's the one that takes all the pressure. The bottom one's just more of a guide than it does have any pressure on it. These are self-lubricating, but that does not mean you should not add lube to them. Just enhances it. You can use a light grease. I prefer 2A gun oil. This stuff is like hot sauce to me. Use that on everything. Beveled part to the top, which is not going to matter realistically. Serve no real purpose in this case. Reinstall the retaining screw and washer. Make sure they're both tight. Want to go ahead and lube my linear bearing, but definitely inspect all 4 rows of the bearings in your linear bearings. Make sure none are missing. If you don't have any grooves on the slide, on the pin, then you likely have no issues with the bearings. So now, this is the one that a lot of people get a flat spot on. Personally, I've not had the issue, but I know for a fact others have. So it gets replaced as well. It's just a flat screwdriver. New bushing. Won't matter which way that the bevel goes. It's irrelevant in this use. That's all there is to that. So at this point, you've got your new brass bushing in there. You've got your roller. So this is ready to reinstall, but for now, we're going to leave it out because it will make it a lot easier to go ahead and pull your shell plate out without it being in. And we'll go ahead and replace the arm and bearings and the bushings. Now at this point, we'll go ahead and replace the bushings that go in the side where the handle's at, along with the arm and bearing. This is the block that holds your swage and priming rods. Let's go ahead and remove the shell plate. I always suggest using an Allen that's blunt on the end for these. I do not like using the ball head type. These are fairly shallow, and the ball heads tend to create a little havoc with them. I do this with my arm down. That way you clear that shaft. You're not trying to work around it with your tools. While you have this apart is a good time if you need to do any cleanup. It's a good time. I'm in pretty good shape. Let's go ahead and remove the handle. Next, let's remove the side covers. Now we're ready to move on. If you have our Bragg & Rice Precision missing primer sensor installed, go ahead and remove the light sensor at this point. Let's remove the swage and the priming rods. Need a few basic tools. 1/2-inch wrench. Again, this should all have been covered in my other videos and in your instruction manual. Now, I have tried this without removing these. There's a huge chance you're going to damage them. Go ahead and remove the center pin for the arm. Let's remove the 4 screws that holds the entire assembly on. So at this point, raise the arm up by hand. This gives you enough room to get past the arm and lift that block out. Now take note, you always want the side that says swage and prime towards you. Go ahead and remove the arm. This is going to get replaced. Much better bearing and a beefier arm. That arm is thicker. The bearing is bigger. No exposed bearings inside. It's going to make a much smoother process. Now, when I did my first press, my mount screws were a little bit longer, and this new arm would not clear that. So make sure that you pay attention to that. See how that is down now? And you'll go to install it, and it's going to clear, and then you're going to raise it up. That cam's going to come around and lower that arm, and it's going to hit that bolt if it's too long. So check on that. Let's go ahead and replace the linear bearings. Go ahead and remove the 2 screws for each one. We're going to do one at a time. That one came out fairly easy. If they don't, flat screwdriver between and twist, and they usually just come right out. This is your new bushing. Again, need to use some sort of lube. I prefer kind of a heavy gun oil on these versus a grease. These have a very tight tolerance inside between the outside diameter of your shaft and the inside diameter of your bushing. That bevel, again, is not going to make a hill of beans in the operation. I like to put it to the top just because I'm OCD. Try to center that as best as possible. If you look, just be careful. That little bevel, optical illusion, it can throw you off on how much distance you have. It doesn't have to be dead on, just close. Go ahead and tighten the 2 screws back, only finger tight at this point. These bushings are no different than the issue with the linear bearings. If you over tighten these, you will squeeze them against the guide rods and make them very tight, and your press is not going to work how you wish. There, not moving. Inspect these for damage from the linear bearings. If you can see, I've had one chattering. Now I can't feel that by touch or my thumbnail, so I'm good. If you can, again, a little bit of emery cloth will clean that right up. Unless it's very, very severe, there's no need to replace it. Just clean it up a little bit. It's going in a bushing now. It's not riding on all the little balls of the linear bearings, so it won't matter. Let's lube the shaft. So again, these are a very nice snug fit. Slides through on its own slowly. So let's put just a little bit of torque on this. Still moves slightly on its own, which is what you want. You do not want to over tighten these. You need it to be able to retain your bushing only, not affect this. So let's go ahead and do the other side. That one's not coming out quite as easy. So again, screwdriver trick. If you need to mount this in a vise, you can do so. There we go. Lube. Helps that thing slide in. Go ahead and get a little lube on the inside. I've got both of my bevels up because of my OCD. Again, truly does not make a hill of beans. Small amount of torque because again, it doesn't take much. Can't move my bushing. Lube the slide, guide rod. I'm good. Got some slow movement on its own. I'm not going to be lopsided, locked up with one side working more than the other. We're ready to reinstall it. At this point, we can go ahead and put the arm on. This arm is specific in the way that it goes. See how it's got all the indentions on the front side, pretty much flat on the back side. The open part of this bearing, that way. That way it cannot work its way out. I've cleaned all the grease that I had on the crankshaft. Again, different type bearing. Doesn't require grease on this, but instead a thin lube. Now these can be a little tight to go on. My other one was. Got to make sure that you don't cock it and work it on easily. Watch your fingers. I should have had that down already. So now we're going to need to tap that a little bit. And it's the same way that my other one was. Which that's good. That's good tolerances. Tap it in stages. Do not just keep tapping one side and wedge it. There it goes. Now I'm using a gunsmithing tool or a hammer. This is Wheeler as well from Wheeler Gunsmithing Tools. use your plastic side, Durlin, whatever that is. Don't use the brass side. You'll just beat this up and beat the finish up. So now we're good. Now we need to raise this back up to lower the arm down. And I'm clearing my bolt that I told you about. Make very sure of that. I cannot stress that enough. We're going to go ahead and put some lube inside the bushing. Let's go ahead and reinstall your swage and priming block. So make sure the swage is to the left of you as you put it on. These I suggest a decent amount of torque. Don't go crazy. You do not want these to come loose while you're using your press. You could actually put a small amount of blue Loctite, not red, on these if you like. Now, if you see that, I'm bound up a little bit. Loosen these back off. And this is important, guys. See here? Raise that up and down at this point. I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way. There we go. As you do the initial tightening at this point. That still doesn't satisfy me entirely. Try to get this lined up. Put our center pin in, center bolt. Now you can't see it on camera, but I do have one hand grabbing the top of the shaft just to assist it a little bit. To me, it's still a little bit tight. Remember, these are brand new. They're going to wear in a little bit. That feels pretty good. Go ahead and torque those down. And we can go ahead and reassemble after we put the swage and the prime rods back in. Again, I'm going to not do that on video. I've already got a video out on how to adjust those, so that saves a little bit of time, and let's just get this thing put together. As I've showed you in my setup videos, the swage and the prime rods are at or below this deck. As long as they're below that, with your arm down, then you'll have no problems with installing your shell plate. Obviously, you can adjust it after it's all together and you have some cases in there. So let's go ahead and reinstall the shell plate. Everything is cycling properly. Ready to move on to the next step. Let's go ahead and reinstall the lower cover. Go ahead and reinstall your handle. At this point, the press should cycle nice and smooth. That is absolutely smooth as butter. It just has a different feel to it. We'll see what it feels like under load, which I can already tell you because I've already done my other press. It's pretty amazing difference. I'm going to do my best to be able to get this on video to where you can understand it, because it's hard to see inside of here to assemble this. It is a smidge tricky. You want to start by going ahead and lubing your guide rods. Now that lower one is still the linear bearing, so you can use grease on it if you like. I'm still going to use my usual go-to. Go ahead and make sure that you lube that lower linear bearing through all the rows. Now let's go ahead and lube the inside of the new bushing. Now, start your spring in. And the best way I have found to do this is just push it in with your fingers down close to the hole. And go ahead and start the center pin into it. It should sit there. It's hard to see, but I've got that center pin in there. Go ahead and start the bottom guide rod. Start your top guide rod. And it's already smoother. We're not even together yet. That's nice. At this point, we can go ahead and put the housing back on. Again, I leave the fourth one on this back corner out because it is hid behind the riser bar. When you need to change stuff out, it is just too hard to get to. I've never had an issue with these coming loose, ever. Everything's beautiful. All the planets are aligning. That thing is so smooth. Watch this handle. That's how you want your press to feel. I don't really suggest letting it bounce like that, but you see how smooth it is. Now let's go ahead and replace your wedge with the stepped wedge. This design is one that the owner of Tornado Automations out of Texas and myself came up with together, and we gave to Frankfurt Arsenal to try, and they liked it. Now it's in your kits. Thank you for doing that, Frankfurt Arsenal, and thank you to David Stanthorpe from Tornado Automations for working with me on it. It was initially his idea, and we perfected it together. Okay, now is a really good time to go ahead and lube the shaft and lube the guide rod. You can use grease. Again, you got a Xerx fitting for the guide rod back here. I still like adding my usual go-to. It just makes for such a smooth experience on anything that it's on. Go ahead and make sure you lube the bushing for the rod on the back of the powder measurer. We can go ahead and reinstall the priming system. Make sure you neutralize it and do so downstroke. This helps center everything on the priming rod. Again, you don't have to over torque these. You ever over torque one to the point that you strip it, trying to remove it, good luck. Do not over torque them. So that is in great shape, and now we can go ahead and reinstall the tool head. So again, visually check in here. Make sure that it is seated all the way against the top of your shaft. It will trick you and you think it's installed correctly, and it's not. Finger tight. Lower it before you tighten it. Very important. Don't twist on that shaft with it in the up position. More tight. Go ahead and start the two nuts on the rod on the back of your powder measurer. Excuse me. So at this point, press is cycling beautiful, nice, smooth. Still have the cover off here because obviously we're going to have to readjust the priming and the swage rod. Now let's pull the side cover off, and let's pull the indexing arm off. Again, if you watched my setup video, you didn't put the screws in the back. That way you don't have to remove this whole riser arm. These three hold it just fine. Cover slips right out. Now we need to remove the arm. This can be done with the arm or the press in the up or the down cycle. I prefer to do it in the down cycle. It's just easier to get to everything. So this one, I like to use my T-handle because this is torqued a little tighter. The arm is actually very simple to remove. Simply slide it off. Should have a plastic or nylon washer there. Just remember that that has to go back on. That's in between right here. Now it's time to replace the bearings on the index arm. Going to get replaced with a completely different type. Now, this arm is the original one that was in this press. This is my second press. I broke the bearings in my first press right off. I got a video on that, on how to replace these, which ones to use. This is the set that I put in that one. This thing's had thousands upon thousands of rounds run through it since. I've never broken them. Have not broken these either. That's because I learned not to break the bearings by short stroking the press or locking the press up and continuing to pull the handle. It has a lot of torque. So I'm going to try my best to make this as clear as I can. If you haven't watched my first video on how to do this, this is why I'm going to walk you through it again. The center pins do not come out unless you get the two clips from inside out of it. You will want something to try to catch those clips. Two picks. And this can be tricky. You're going to need to clean the grease out of here if it's full of grease so you can see these. You need to catch one side of the clip with one of them and pull it with the other. It may take you several tries. Voila. There's one of the clips. You must remove both clips. There it goes. It is not necessarily easy to do. Now you should be able to tap that center out. There's the old bearing. That's the original, and it's undamaged. We're going to clean the grease out. What we couldn't get to initially. New style. It's got a bushing in the center. It's not actually a bearing. Gonna lube that up. Go ahead and lube the center pin. Now the fun begins to put these clips back in. They can be fun. Make sure you start them in the groove. And what I like to do is push the bearing over once it's started in the groove to close the gap. Be very careful doing this, but I use the backside of my razor blade on my box cutter. Again, it's going to take you a few tries. There it went. There's one. Again, make sure it is in the groove first. You'll never push it over the shaft otherwise. And there's two. It's installed properly. So let's flip this and do the other side. It's the exact same. I apologize, I'm losing my voice from shooting on the video. Spin it till I see the open part of my clip. Ha! Still have a lot of grease in that one. It's hard to see the end of my clip. There's the other one. I like using a bright cloth because it's just easy to see when it comes out. And using the microfiber cloth catches everything pretty well. Original and unbroken. First time you do this, it can be a little bit of a pain. It's a little bit of a pain every time you do it, but after you've done it a few times, it's not so bad. The idea is to not have to do it at all. That one's in. Now, once these are done on the older presses, the newer presses will start having them. I do not know when that implementation will take place, but it is my understanding that it will happen. Both are in, both are working. So now we can reinstall our arm and we can move on about life. So now we can reinstall the arm. Remember the cutaway from my other video, if you watched it. It goes this direction. Remember to put your washer back on it. Everything should be working very smoothly. I would go ahead and put some more grease on the cam for your new bushings. And aside from that, we'll put the cover back on and you're ready to readjust your press and have it back in working order like you want. Guys, that's it. That's the nuts and bolts of the whole thing. Everything should be working properly now. You should have a stronger and much smoother press. Very reliable. And everything should be wonderful.